I do think a lot of people kind of like the challenge as well of trying to visit all countries or trying to visit so many countries within a specific time period. It's like a nice challenge, kind of a bucket list idea. But you can apply these game principles to sustainable travel as well. So you could also challenge yourself to find 10 eco stays within a year, or to visit 5 national parks. So you can kind of keep the challenge in the game aspect, but just put the focus on something different, and that different thing can be sustainability.
Welcome to the Travel Not to Escape podcast. I'm your host, Jolene on the Go, solo female traveler and creative entrepreneur. Think of me as your skydive instructor, empowering you to take the leap into solo travel to push past your fears and transform your life. Join me every Tuesday as we explore the world of solo travel with purpose and discover how you can use it for your personal transformation, learn how to make meaningful connections around the world, and reignite your spirit of play. We aren't just talking about traveling to find ourselves anymore. We're all about doing the work to understand who we authentically are, breaking through our limiting beliefs, and taking the leaps to manifest lives we are excited about. Through interviews, solo episodes, and meditations, each episode is packed with practical tips, strategies, and inspiring stories from guests who have transformed their lives through solo travel. Whether you're a seasoned traveler or just starting out on your journey, the Travel Not to Escape podcast is here to inspire and empower you to solo travel with purpose. Strap on your helmet. We're about to jump headfirst into the journey of a lifetime. Are you ready? Let's go. Welcome, fellow navigators. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to invite you all to get your passport to connection. What is that? Well, we talk a lot about connection here on the podcast, how to connect with yourself as well as make meaningful connections with others. But I know it's not as simple as going to a meetup event and making instant best friends, at least not always. And there's work that you need to understand yourself and what you're looking for in friendships, where to meet them if you're traveling or moving to a new city, how to handle rejection and filter for like-minded friendships, and how to maintain these friendships over time and distance. So if you've ever felt the pangs of loneliness, and well, who hasn't, and wish you could just figure out all these secrets to these questions, then Passport to Connection may just be for you. So this is a one-day live virtual workshop and monthly mastermind where I'm going to empower you with all of the knowledge and actionable steps and direction so you can make yourself more magnetic, reignite your spirit of play, and in turn, identify and attract all those beautiful soul-aligned friendships that you're looking for. And this isn't just a workshop. This is a community in itself. So head over to travelnottoscape.com/friends to get more information and sign up. And hurry, this is going to be an intimate workshop, so make sure to save your spot today. And with that, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to today's Travel Not to Escape episode. I'm so excited to welcome our guest today, Lotte from the Sustainable Travel Guide. And we're going to get to know Lotte's story of transformation through travel in today's episode, and specifically chat about the work that she's doing in sustainable travel. Thank you so much for coming on to the show today.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you for inviting me.
Yay, I'm so excited. And where are you calling in from right now?
I'm currently in Sheffield in England.
Before we dive into your background and travels, I want to start off with a question about play to get to know you a little bit better. What was your favorite childhood activity?
Definitely just playing outside with friends, and we also used to make up our own games, which was really fun.
And the games that you made up, were they like running around tag type games, or were they board games? Like, what kind of games did you guys used to do?
Both, really.
Wow.
So outside it would indeed be like tag things and hiding and whatever. But we also made some games on paper. I was very into horses at the time, so we had this kind of horse stable game. It was quite funny.
Oh wait, what's the horse stable game? Like what do you do in that?
Yeah, so we made all these cards with photos of horses and then highlight like what their names were and what they were good at, and then we would trade the horses and go
Oh
outside and
wow.
run and pretend like we're a horse.
That is such a unique game. I've never heard that before, but I really love it. And I think that it combines a lot of different types of play personalities in one, which I haven't seen before. So it sounds like you have some of the being in your body type of kinesthetic play personality, where being in your body lights you up. There's a bit of explorer, I think, in there as well. If you like to be outside and like get to know new things, see new things, as well as like the creating your own games. That sounds like a bit of an explorer type of energy as well. And then I can't tell if like storytelling is one of the personalities,
Yeah,
just because
definitely.
like the imagination piece.
Yeah. It's so
It's
interesting to hear like an analysis of something totally random I did as a kid.
yeah, and I think that it's so interesting because so I've been reading and researching a lot about play, and as part of that, like diving into the work that Dr. Stuart Brown has done in the Institutes of Play, where he's like studied thousands of people who are, you know, part of his research, and like asked them about all the ways that they played when they were children and the ways that they play as adults as well. But through that, he was able to categorize like the different play personalities. And that's kind of why I base my first question on that, because you can get to know so much about someone based off of what lit them up when they were children, because that stuff actually still continues as into adulthood as well. All of those same things that you still love to do, like that was like you as a child in your purest form and making those things up, right? Before you had to go to work, before you had to go to school, and like all these other societal expectations. So it's really cool to like take a peek back into the things that lit you up as a child.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, speaking of that, where did you grow up? And can you explain a little bit about your background and then how you found your way to solo traveling?
Yeah, so I'm originally from the Netherlands. I'm now 25 and I've lived there only until a few months ago when I moved to the UK to live with my partner who's British. So, yeah, I've spent a lot of time in the Netherlands, and that also explains, I think, my love for cycling, even though I didn't
Mm,
particularly like cycling as a child. But yeah, it's just such a big part of the culture, and it's very
yeah.
normal to use bikes for transportation, just to get to places, but also load stuff up on your bike and transport it around the city. So I think without even noticing, that subconsciously does have an effect on how you kind of view the world and transport.
Mm,
And with regards to traveling, yeah, it was just kind of a very normal thing where every year you would go with your parents on a summer vacation. And yeah, we'd often go to different places, and in part because it was just very normal, but also because I really liked it.
mm-hmm,
I think that's kind of what kept me interested in travel.
mm-hmm.
Also because my parents really like to go to museums, so meaning travel was also very much about learning new things and yeah, seeing new places, but also learning about those places in museums.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's great when you can start earlier through exposure from like the adults around you, because then it does open up your world at a much earlier age. And what type of travel do you do now as an adult?
Yeah, so now I really like to go on cycling holidays. So it's basically long distance, where I would ride maybe on average 100 kilometers a day. So some longer days, some shorter ones. And it's kind of like backpacking. Instead of having all your gear on your back, you load it on your bike. So it's a bit more comfortable. And I have also increasingly been into train travel. So really would enjoy to do more long distance train rides as well, or a combination of those where where I take my bike on a train to a different country and then ride around for a bit and take the train back, basically.
Yeah, and being in Europe, I'm sure that that makes that so much easier too because of the accessibility of the trains and how close the countries are as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. But the part of taking your bike on a train logistically is quite a challenge. But I do enjoy also the puzzle of finding the most efficient routes and where you can and cannot take your bikes. But yeah, being in Europe definitely helps.
And what do those cycling trips look like for you? Like, where do you start? Where have you ended? And I've never done a cycling trip. I barely know how to ride a bike, so I'm very curious what that process or what that kind of trip looks like.
Yeah, so the first time I did a long distance bike ride was from Edinburgh to London. And that was actually because I had a friend living in Edinburgh and a friend living in London, and I wanted to visit them both. So I thought, why not cycle?
Oh wow.
So that was very much kind of from a practical perspective almost. And then after that, during COVID, it was of course quite difficult to go abroad. So I did a cycle trip through the Netherlands with a friend, where we started where I lived and ended where she lived, which is pretty much on the other side of the country. So again, it was kind of practical, basically.
Mhm.
But during those trips, I figured I really just enjoyed it as well. So that's kind of how I got into it. And now I'm looking more at what is a place that's easy to reach, as well as has beautiful nature that it would be nice to cycle around in.
And do you like what type of clothing, backpack, like how much stuff do you bring with you? Where do you stop along the way and for how long?
Yeah, so the amount of stuff you can bring with you is not a lot. The first two times I went, I only had a small backpack. So not like a backpacking backpack, but just a very much like a normal backpack. If you're walking around the city, that's what you have.
Mhm.
And I fitted all of my stuff for 2 weeks in there.
Oh, for 2 weeks. Wow.
Yeah. So it basically means two cycle outfits, and then one normal outfit, and then of course toiletries and stuff. So for me, it's quite important to then find some washing facilities along the way.
Yeah.
And because I'm not super into camping in general, and then being on the bike is, of course, exercise as well. So I do value a bed at night. So usually stay in B&Bs or with friends if they happen to live along the route.
And like when you plan a cycling trip, do you plan activities on your stops as well? Or is it more of like, okay, I want to get there as fast as possible?
Yeah, good question. I find that I often don't really have the energy after a day of cycling to go into town and to do a lot.
Hmm.
And up until now, I've been quite limited by days off, either of me or the person I was cycling with. So that basically meant just cycling and then, yeah, going out for dinner, but not enjoying or exploring all of the places we passed by so much. So, in terms of embracing slow travel a little bit more, I think it would be nice to plan in a few more rest days where you can indeed also do activities. But I normally don't plan activities except for the city where I start and the city where I end.
Yeah, that I can imagine how long those cycling days could be and how exhausted you would be afterwards. Are you doing these like long cycling trips solo completely or with a partner or with friends along the way?
Yeah, up until now, I've always done it with one other person because I get a little bit bored when I'm on my own. So I do like to go for bike rides by myself sometimes, but then after a few hours, you kind of want someone to talk to.
Mhm.
And I find that in general, in travel, it's always nice to be with people so the memories aren't only your own, but you have shared memories with other people. So that can, of course, mean that you travel somewhere on your own to meet other people there. But doing a full cycling trip on my own, I don't think I would enjoy as much.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And like what are the roads like even? Like it's completely, I think, because growing up in the US, it's not something that we typically do a lot because of just how far everything is. So I'm not even sure I could visualize what that, like, what a cycling from one city to the other looks like. Is it a main highway or is it small dirt roads? Like, what are the paths that you're cycling through?
Yeah, so that really depends on the type of bike you're on. So the trips that I've done have been on a road bike. So if you have more like a mountain bike or a gravel bike, you can really go through forest, for example. But on a road bike, that's not great for your tires or your wheels. So I do stick to tarmac. Now, in the Netherlands, we're very spoiled with a lot of dedicated cycle paths, and throughout Europe, you see more and more of them popping up. There's also the Eurovelo network, which highlights like cycle routes throughout Europe. So there are signposted and dedicated cycle lanes, but indeed, I do end up cycling on roads fairly often. You're definitely not allowed to cycle on a highway,
Oh yeah.
which I think is good. But
Probably.
yeah, minor roads are fine. And especially when I cycled in Sweden, the minor roads were very quiet, so you'd only see a couple of cars every now and then. But I've also been on fairly major roads in the UK, and that's just not as enjoyable because there's a lot of exhaust from the cars and a lot of noise. So yeah, you kind of have to know what you're doing with planning the routes.
And do you have any concerns about safety when you're going on these types of trips?
Not really. I'm not very afraid of cars passing me. I know some people do find that a bit scary, but personally, I don't mind so much. The thing is that you do have to know a little bit about bike maintenance. So especially if you're on your own, you don't know how to change a flat tire, then you're gonna have a hard time.
Mhm.
So it's good to definitely be either with someone that knows how to do it or be able to do a little bit of maintenance yourself. I think that's the biggest point, kind of knowing how your bike works.
Yeah. Do you have any concerns of, like, you and one other person going cross country or across multiple countries, and like the safety just in terms of being a woman as you're traveling and doing this?
Yeah, so in Europe, I would say this is really not a problem for me.
Mm.
And because I prefer to stay in B&Bs or hostels or hotels overnight, I'm usually not in super remote areas anyways. But yeah, the safety in terms of like what people you come across doesn't affect me, thankfully.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the positive thing sometimes, and just in Europe as well, especially since a lot more people are biking and using that as a mode of transportation, where it's not so uncommon that you stick out and that, you could potentially, I like, there's of course, those horror stories of getting followed or like getting into situations where people are, not the best or most well intentioned. So I know that that is a fear that comes up a lot when you're traveling as well. So that's really cool. Thank you for sharing your biking, your cycling stories. I always love hearing about different ways that people travel. So you started traveling at a younger age with family, doing more of like visiting museums and more of the learning, and then it sounds like around the pandemic time was when you started doing some more of the cycling trips. What does your like, have you done significant solo travel as well during your path or during your time?
Yeah, a little bit. So I have a friend who's from the US that I really wanted to visit. So I did, and I flew to Iceland and then to the US and spent a couple of days in Iceland on my own. But I found that also a little bit boring. I really need someone to talk to.
Mhm.
So for me, the solo travel is really going somewhere on my own and then meeting other people at the
Mhm.
destination. So what I've also done is I worked at a summer camp in Canada. So I obviously also went there on my own, but then there's a lot of people at the summer camp, a lot of staff from all over the world, which is also where I met my husband.
Ah, nice. Yeah, and okay, so I find that there's, solo travel doesn't mean you're alone the whole time. I feel like that's like the misconception sometimes. But I find that solo travel is you. Oh, sorry, my head's okay. Is you going out of your comfort zone and going out to travel, booking it on your own, and then actively, if you do find that you really like being in other people's company, finding the ways to connect with those people during those trips so that you can meet new people and experience other things with them. So yeah, I think that like for example, if you do a group tour, but you're solo when you go into it, I also think that that's another form of solo travel. So I think that there's a
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
different ways that people can travel, and you have to really dive into you and assess like what is it that is true to you and feels really good and that you're craving in that moment. So it's cool to see that you're kind of listening and in tune with what it is that you're needing as you're going on these trips. Share with me. So the summer camp that you worked at in Canada, how did that come
Yes.
about? And then also, how'd you meet your husband there?
Yeah, so I quite like to work with kids and be around kids, and I wanted to go on a holiday and not spend too much money. So all of these things kind of merged into the idea of working at a summer camp for one summer. I'm not entirely sure anymore how I came up with this idea, but I think it was like a combination of these factors. So I signed up for an organization that then sends people to different summer camps, and they sent me to this one in Canada. So that's where I ended up.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, like I said, there were staff from all over the world, basically, mostly English speaking countries. And I led some activities, including circus type stuff.
Oh,
But that
fun.
was yeah, that was in an air conditioned gym, and we found that the kids mostly came to this activity to be in the air conditioning.
Oh.
So I then switched to leading the mountain biking activity, which is what my now husband was also leading. And in general, a lot of the staff like to spend their time off getting drunk in a tiny town, whereas I was like, guys, we're in Canada, let's go hiking. And there was
Yeah.
only one other person in the camp that wanted to go on a hike for me with me, so that's kind of yeah, how we met.
It was meant to be. Yeah.
It was meant to be.
That's amazing. What was the program that you went on in order to do this workaway or this camp?
It was called CCUSA. I think it's an international company, and I know that the British people used Americam. So there's different types of organizations, but essentially they do the same, which is send people to different summer camps around the US and Canada.
Oh, I love this. I'm on the website right now. I'll share this in the show links because I think it's a cool option for people. And you, of course, it sounds like you highly recommend the experience.
Yeah, it was definitely a great experience. I must say, I didn't enjoy all parts of it because it's very much a 24/7 job. And with the kind of shoeing and insurance culture in the US and Canada, you're not allowed to do a whole lot of things as staff. For example, we
Mm.
had to do a swimming exam. And then, even when you passed the swimming exam, you were not allowed to go swimming in a lake as an adult without there being a lifeguard. So they were quite strict on these kind of things. And yeah, there was also a little bit of culture difference, I think. So overall, it was a really cool experience. But while I was there, I didn't always enjoy it.
Interesting. How long was the whole experience for? Was it like a few months?
Yeah, I think it was from halfway through June until the end of August.
And were you able to explore it all outside of the camp before or after your job time, or were you mostly just there for the job?
Yeah, I personally was mostly there for the job because I needed to be back in time for the uni
Mm.
semester to start. But a lot of people did do a road trip through Canada after the work ended. There was also a little bit of time in between. So they had 2 sessions of 1 month. And then the kids would go home and there would be new kids the second month. So in between there was, I think, a long weekend where I also traveled around a little bit.
And where did you travel to? Just somewhere around Canada?
Yeah, so the summer camp that I stayed at was close to Montreal. So I went to Quebec City
Oh,
as
nice.
well. But a lot of people traveled way more after because they have more time. So they went to like Toronto and other cities as well.
Did you, I mean, obviously you stayed in touch with your now husband, but like, what was that transition between camp and then, because now you guys are married in Sheffield, right?
Yeah. So actually, we at the time were just friends, and we kind of kept in touch a bit over the years. I think we've maybe seen each other twice, but then also COVID hit, so it was actually only about 2 years ago that we started dating.
Oh, wow. So you guys got married recently then?
Yeah, a couple months
Con-
ago.
oh, congrats. That's exciting.
Thank you.
And then do you both do a lot of traveling together then now in the recent years since?
Yeah. So the last cycling trip that I did through Sweden was also with Daniel, which was absolutely great. I think we had kind of the same pace and
Mm.
the same energy levels and the same things we wanted to do. So it was just perfect, really.
Yeah, I was gonna ask how if traveling with a partner, like what are the things that kind of come up? And it sounds like if the energy levels and the pace are something that's important. Do you both have similar interests in places you want to go and where you want to stay as well?
Yeah, I think so. I am a little bit more extreme in terms of wanting to travel sustainably.
Mm.
So I actually don't want to fly anymore. Definitely not within Europe. I wouldn't say that I'll never fly again, but for now, there's so much to see within Europe that I don't think it makes much sense to hop on a plane every year to the other side of the world. Whereas you can also see so much kind of in your backyard.
Mm.
And I think my partner is a bit more okay with the occasional flight for holidays. But he's also very happy to just see more of Europe together. So that works out well.
Yeah, no. And can you, as we kind of dive into the sustainability topic, I'd love to get a general understanding of like what it means for you to travel sustainably. So it sounds like
Yeah,
flights aren't part of the traveling aspect.
yeah, for me at the minute, flights are a big one, but I think you also have to be realistic. And people that have family abroad will need planes, especially if there's an ocean in between the countries where you live. Yeah, you will sometimes need to fly. And also, I think people that go on a holiday once a year are not the biggest problem. It's more like frequent flyers and just excessive flying, really. So yeah, transportation is obviously a very big part of sustainability, but also the places where you stay. There's a big difference in the impact that, for example, a big chain hotel makes versus a local homestay. And with activities as well, do they benefit the local population, or is all the money you spend just going into big international corporations? So there's a lot of different aspects to it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of which I also didn't really realize until recently. So the accommodation, I think, is a big one that I can also still improve on. But it's a lot of research goes into trying to make your travels as sustainable as possible. So that's also why I started my blog, because I think there's a lot of people that would want to travel more sustainably, but just don't know where to start, especially if you think, oh, flying is bad, I can't fly anywhere, it's too difficult. So I want to show that it's even with very small steps, you can already change the way you travel. And it doesn't mean you're never allowed to go on a plane anymore, or you're never allowed to stay in a hotel anymore. It's just finding kind of what works for you and how you can can make a positive impact on the places you visit.
Yeah. And I think that that's what's important too, because I think when you go into too much of an extreme, that's when you scare off the people that you want to actually bring it on board into this idea of sustainability. Because if you say, like, you are bad, you should never fly ever, ever again, or you're a terrible person, then it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to listen to you, right? Like, that's the immediate reaction. It's like, and next,
Yeah.
right? So it has to come up with, like, okay, in what ways can you make this topic more approachable and less shameful, so that people take the bits and pieces that work for them and are excited to incorporate that into their travels, rather than like writing it off completely as like, okay, that's just too much, right? What was
Yeah, that's a
the
perfect summary.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I think that like even for me, right? Like I, of course, like I travel full time. I'm a digital nomad. A lot of my friends do the same, and I'm very much in the solo travel space where it is a lot of travel, a lot of flight travel, because travel is a beautiful catalyst for transformation. Also, be able to see, like, yes, there's cultures and things within Europe that you can take a look at through cycling or through more local means, but there's so much more expansion as well depending on where you're at. And also, like, for example, if you're on an island, then like you're gonna have to fly, right? So there's
Well,
depending
not
on your perspective.
necessarily.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true, but
the
like,
UK is an island, and there's
but
still
I'm
a good
thinking like
few
a
ways to get
Caribbean.
here.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. But
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
thinking
yeah.
like if you're if you're like in a small island, or like in the Philippines, for example, if you're on a small island on one of the thousand of islands here, it's like, okay, well, what are the options, and making sure that it's like not prohibitive in any means. What
Yeah.
was the catalyst that started you on this sustainable travel journey?
Yeah, so I think in general, I embraced a more sustainable lifestyle. I'm still trying to improve that. So one of the things is obviously only eating plant-based. I hardly ever buy new clothes. I try to get more into second-hand shopping as well. So all of these things kind of gradually changed for me, and then it only made sense to align that with my travel habits as well. So the actual catalyst, I think, was when I was studying. Didn't have a super big budget for travel, but one of my friends was living in London. Didn't have a lot of days off either, so the easiest thing was just to do a quick weekend trip and fly back and forth. But like London, compared to the Netherlands, is so close by that even when I was doing it, I felt really bad about it. And then on the way back, there was actually a very big storm, so my flight got cancelled. And I was actually really glad that it got cancelled and I had to take an overnight bus instead. And that was the realization for me, like, what am I doing? There's no reason to fly such a short distance if there's buses, trains, and ferries. So since then, I've been like, okay, I don't want to fly anymore in the foreseeable future. And that was, I think, at the beginning of 2020, so not super long ago, almost 4 years. And that, yeah, that kind of switched my mindset in terms of travel. So it very much came from the transport, and then gradually I started realizing that sustainability in travel is so much broader. It's also really about benefiting the local communities instead of paying big brands for your travel experiences.
Yeah, yeah, that I can definitely get on board with, and like the impacts of over tourism as well, which I'd love to dive into. But I will say, so I've taken that bus from London to the Netherlands to Amsterdam. It is rather rough. I'm not gonna lie. It's a long bus.
Yep.
And I had a screaming baby while we were going through the channel, and it was not enjoyable being underground, underwater, and no way to escape. So, what are your thoughts in terms of like balancing comfort and time with sustainability? Because the other aspect too is, like, unfortunately, in a lot of parts of the world, like U.S. being one of them, like vacations aren't really a thing in terms of having allotted vacation days, if any. But if you're lucky enough to have a company that does, you might get 2 weeks. So a lot of people do have to, in that time span, like do the more convenient travels that are available, which includes flights. So like, what's your thoughts on
Yeah.
balancing between like the time and the cost and the sustainability aspect?
Yeah, that's a bit of a puzzle, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I think depending on your budget, you can kind of choose your level of comfort. So I would say trains and ferries are probably the most comfortable ways to travel. For me, more comfortable than taking a flight. I think flights are often quite cramped, and airports are
Yeah.
just, everyone is stressed, and it's just not a great vibe, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you don't have to be there quite as long in advance when you take a long distance train. But then, indeed, trains and ferries often do take longer. So I think a good alternative is overnight trains and overnight ferries. They are often also a bit more expensive, but you can often choose to not have a bed and kind of sacrifice some sleep for a lower price. So a lot of overnight trains give you the option to have your own compartment, have a shared compartment, or just have a chair for the night.
It's a really long time to not sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, but if you're on a budget and you do care about the sustainability, then that is an option. And there are also some night buses that are a bit more comfortable with reclining chairs and stuff. I agree that the London to Rotterdam is not the best
It's
one.
not the best bus at all.
But it depends, it also depends on who you're sitting next to and if you have
Yeah.
babies on board, definitely. But I guess that counts for all modes of transportation.
Yeah, for
So if
sure.
you want to completely kind of avoid this problem, then I think the solution is to travel much more locally and also realize that you don't always need to go very far or to a different country to have a transformative experience and to explore new places.
Yeah, that I can agree with for sure. Because I think that the transformation really starts with you and asking yourself, like, what it is that you're looking for. And if you are wanting at that moment, craving just like something completely different, different culture, different, activities, terrain, then yeah, maybe you lean towards more of the flight and long travel. But if it is just trying to get maybe a little bit more art into your life, maybe a little bit more outdoors into your life, then I definitely can see where keeping the travels more local and testing yourself, because that's one of the things I teach people as well when they're solo traveling is take some small steps. Like you don't have to take the trip across the world in order
Yeah.
to test whether or not you can go to a restaurant by yourself. Like you can do that locally, have those local experiences that build up your confidence. And it sounds like while you're doing so, you can take into consideration some sustainable options that, aren't necessarily completely, going to derail you from what it is that you're wanting to experience in your transformation. So I think that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
And I think that's also where COVID had quite a positive impact because people weren't able to travel abroad. A lot of people I actually came to realize, myself included, how nice your own country can be.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, doing the cycle trip through the Netherlands also showed me places I didn't know existed. So yeah, definitely go and explore your
Your
own area
backyard.
and
Yeah, I love
yeah,
that.
yeah, see what you find.
Yeah, I started off nomading in the US. And so I rented a car from one place, drove it to the next, and then would mostly stay in downtown areas or areas where I could easily walk. So I didn't need a car at all during the month that I was in that particular city. And it would just be getting from one place to the other. And honestly, I really love that experience because I got to see more of the in between the states and like really seeing and experiencing it. And I loved the slowness of the travel as well because I wasn't having to feel like rushed or like I had to fit in everything. It was more just like I get to be, I get to just see a new place and feel like a local in that place as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's also one of the reasons I really like the cycling because you actually get to see your country.
Mm.
Whereas if you, fly into a city, spend a few days there, and leave again, you don't really get the same feel. Especially if it's popular tourist areas, you're most likely to see a lot of other tourists. and not really know what a country looks like.
Yeah, yeah. I think the general trend too, I think is beautiful of like slow travel in order to experience beyond the main tourist sites,
Yeah.
because that is something that like in a lot of the travel industry, it's a bunch of guides that are like these are the top 10 things you must see, and to your point, maybe not the most sustainable. Maybe it's all big tour companies, big hotels that are sponsoring these guides, and so you're getting their recommendations on what it is you should do in that city. How do you approach planning for trips with that more sustainable lens in place?
Yeah, I think tying into what you're saying is also finding out what you like about travel and what you want to see. Because oftentimes these top 10 things to do don't even align with your interests.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people feel like they need to see these things
Mm-hmm.
because they're so
It's on a
popular
list.
and they're
Yeah.
popular for a reason. Yeah. And I mean, that's also okay. If that's what you want to do, then that's also fine. But I think having more of a purpose for travel also really helps. So, for example, going to a place because you want to visit someone who lives there, who can then also show you around the maybe more hidden areas or, yeah, more authentic experiences. So I think that's a big one. But in general, just trying to align your general interests with what you're doing as you travel. I think another tip that I would give to people is to kind of join local groups. So, for example,
Mm.
I also do rowing, and I went to Copenhagen. And before I went there, I messaged a rowing club like, "Hey, can I join a training?" And they did let me join. So it's a
Nice.
way to meet local people in a more genuine way and have just an incredible experience.
I love that you do that because when you had mentioned before that we really like experiencing things with people, that was going to be my other question too. Is how do you make those connections with people in the cities that you're visiting? And yes, Facebook groups are one of my top tips because you can connect with people that have your same interests, are in that same city that you're going to, and you can even ask questions back and forth, see their photos, just to see like, am I going to like their energy and vibe? And you can maybe even have a call ahead of time if you're feeling a little worried, because I think that that's such a great way to already feel at home. And to your point, also get more local, authentic experiences in there as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And the rowing piece too, I like that you incorporate the moving in your body activity, because that's the other step that I link with the play style is like, okay, using because some people don't know what their interests are, so they're just like, I don't know, I just need an escape, and we're like, okay, let's dig into this a little bit and like, okay, what is it that makes you feel alive? Like, what is it that you love doing that just you could use more of in your life? And if it is being in your body, like in what ways can you do that? And I actually reached out to like salsa communities in the same way that you did the rowing companies, and people are so helpful. And there's a community around any of your interests that you like have.
Yeah,
Like there's
absolutely.
something for everyone.
Yeah, and it is a bit of an iterative process as well, because going on travels also highlights what your interests are.
Hmm.
So it's kind of knowing in advance and tuning your traveling towards your interest, but definitely also the other way around. I think traveling is often a way for people to experience new things and pick up new
Yes.
interests. So it goes both ways.
Yeah, I love that traveling is it kind of gives you like a buffet of options as well, of like, do you want to do something artsy? Do you want to do something like in your body and adventurous and adrenaline? And then you get to try all these little things and then bring it back with you, or bring it onto your next trip and like add on to it and make it more of a like solid firm interest for the future too.
Yeah, yeah, I like the idea of a buffet. That's a good
Yeah.
metaphor.
A vegan buffet, let's just say.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when you're starting off planning for a trip for yourself, do you typically start off with the interest and then make sure that it becomes sustainable in a lot of the ways that you can? Or do you start off with more sustainable destinations and then try to find your interest from there?
Yeah, I often start with the destination, which is then based on how easily can I get there by probably train and ferry mostly. and then finding areas that, well, either I like city trips, but also seeing nature. So trying to combine these things and then kind of determining what I'll be doing there quite shortly before I travel. And of course, keeping a bit of flexibility as well, just kind of seeing as you're there what you feel like doing. So yeah, I often start with destination and transport, and then activities will come later.
And if you are talking to someone completely new to the sustainable travel space, but they're like, oh, I want to know how I can, say they're a traveler that's like, I want to, go to 30 under 30 places, right? Like before I turn 30, I want to hit 30 new countries, check things off of a list, right? They're very much like a bucket list traveler, but they've stumbled upon your blog, your Instagram, and they're like, oh, sustainable travel guide. Like, I'm curious. What would be the top 3 posts that you would want to show them in order to bring them on to the more sustainable travel side?
Yeah, so I think one of them would be kind of what we talked about earlier, the balance between cost and time and comfort in terms of picking your mode of transportation. And another one would be one of my very earliest posts explaining that it's also about small steps. So, also, like we said before, you don't have to swear off flying forever. And thirdly, I think something about slow travel. So it's not, it can be okay to want to visit 30 countries before you're 30. I mean, do an interrail trip through Europe and you're halfway there. That's
Yeah.
all fine. But also try to figure out, like, why do you want this? Why do you have this goal of visiting 30 countries before you're 30? Is it really because you want it, or do you kind of feel like you want to show off to other people? And I guess realizing that can be a little bit confrontational, but yeah, trying to uncover why this is your goal and why you don't want to immerse yourself in a place for a bit longer. Why? Yeah, basically finding out the why of traveling.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question to ask, and I think that that's something that we should take a little bit of time to ask ourselves, because it actually makes the planning process so much easier once you know your why. Because you're like, oh, okay, like, why am I going there? Cool, and then you can structure all the activities, the experiences, the people that you meet around that central why, as opposed to, I think sometimes people go on a trip, say just to cross it off their list, and then they come back home and they feel like they may not have gotten the experience that they had wanted out of that trip. And maybe it's because they went on a standard itinerary that they found online, did all the things that they thought they, like, quote unquote should do, and then came back and was like missing whatever it was that they were hoping would satisfy them on that trip.
Yeah, and I think then it's kind of a, how do you say, a cycle, because you weren't satisfied. You feel like, oh, I need to go somewhere again. Whereas you actually need to find out why didn't the trip live up to your expectations. And actually tying into the play aspect a little bit, I do think a lot of people kind of like the challenge as well of trying to visit all countries or trying to visit so many countries within a specific time period. It's like a nice challenge, kind of a bucket list idea. But you can apply these game principles to sustainable travel as well. So you could also challenge yourself to find 10 eco stays within a year,
Oh.
or to visit 5 national parks. So you can kind of keep the challenge in the game aspect, but just put the focus on something different, and that different thing can be sustainability.
Oh, I love that. Do you have something like that on your blog already where you're gamifying
Not
it?
yet, but now that we're talking about it, I do have some content lined up, so I will try to publish this before the this episode comes out.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I think that that would be really interesting, because I think that that's like, as your, to your point, the play piece is so important. And if you give it to people and make it fun, I think it becomes less intimidating and more exciting to not just do yourself, but also to share it with other people. So if you made like a sustainable travel bingo, or some type
Exactly,
of
yeah.
bucket list, I think that that would be really cool. Yeah, because it's just like, okay, like these are ways, small steps. And you can even have it where it's like, these are like the small steps, medium steps, larger steps of, like, say you're progressing on a board game of like, how sustainable can you be, right? And then you start off with a tiny thing, things, and then it slowly builds up momentum. And then next thing you know, you're like speaking about it and, and like one of the
Yeah.
leaders in sustainability.
You're on this podcast and
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so I think that that's cool, and I think definitely for people that may have a certain idea about travel, or that the way that they want to travel, because maybe they haven't thought about exactly how they got that idea. Maybe they just see a lot of it on social media, and a lot of the rhetoric on social media is like that bucket list travel, is the let's go 30 under 30 and do all these main sites. But if you start to popularize the topics of sustainability in a fun way, I think that that goes a really long way towards the goal that you have.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think it also reflects society in general, where our brains like new stimuli, and the media have really tapped into that. So, for example,
Mm.
articles are getting shorter and shorter. On social media, you also see that if a video is longer than 10 seconds, people probably won't watch it till the end. So, all of these things kind of tie into that need for new experiences, which I think aligns with the 30 under 30. So
Mm.
in a sense, you also can't really blame yourself entirely for it, because it's the way that society has evolved, and also what makes our brains happy in a sense.
Yeah.
So I think realizing this is probably the first step to changing and potentially traveling more sustainably.
Yeah, I think that that's a great perspective as well. As everything is a lot. It's almost oversaturated, and I feel like my nervous system even is just such in like hyper mode at the moment, because of the amount of content that we're consuming at such fast speeds. And yeah, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Which I think is great, that, slow travel, longer form content, less flashy, just more sustainable does. It is going to be like hopefully the thing that wins out in the end, because we're going to burn ourselves out. I know so many people already that have been traveling, myself included, right? In different periods of my time, I get burnt out from the overstimuli, from the travel, and having to get back and rooted to myself to ask, like, why am I doing this? Like, why do I want this lifestyle? Or, what is it about this that I want to keep continue onward? So I think the intentionality that goes behind sustainability that you're promoting is something that I definitely align with as well. Well, wow, the time has gone by so fast. I want to be able to ask you a few questions that I ask all of my guests on the pod, and one of
Yeah,
which we,
go
we kind
ahead.
of covered already, and it's about the connection piece. I know that you use Facebook groups to connect with people ahead of time, but out of all the different methods that you've used as you've been traveling, what have been the best ways for you to make meaningful connections in the way that you would recommend others to use as well?
Yeah, so like you said, finding groups that align with your interests, but also meeting friends of friends.
Mm.
So when I visited my friends in the US, I also went on hikes like with her friends, spent time at her parents' home, and that's also a really great way to meet people. So yeah, trying to visit people you already know or know via someone else can also help, because you already have this one thing in common, which is the mutual friend,
Hmm.
or family, or yeah, vague acquaintances even. But it does make it a little bit easier, kind of opens the gateway to meeting more local people.
That is a great tip. And that's actually like one of the top tips I give people as well, because you already have like a small vetting that happened because it's a friend of a friend. So you're like, at the very least, hopefully they don't murder you, because there's some people that
Yeah.
right. So there's at least a little bit of vetting there. Um, and then yeah, the interest. It's like, okay, if they don't murder you and they have like something in common, like that's a win right there for for your visit already. That's great. I love that tip. And that's actually the best way that I've made a lot of my friends as well. Another question I'd love to ask you is kind of through the whole process as you've been on this journey, what is one question that you wish you could have asked your younger self sooner? A self-reflection question or journal question that would have that has given you so much clarity that you wish you could have had asked earlier.
Yeah, so I think that would be, what is the impact of your travels aside from just the transportation? So I think accommodation is still the thing I struggle with most because you have all these eco hotels and whatnot, but they're very expensive.
Mm.
So if you're traveling on a budget, or even like it doesn't have to be a tight budget, but even kind of wanting to spend less than £100 a night is
Yeah.
already difficult if you want to stay like in an eco place.
Hmm.
And I hadn't really realized that. Also to do with booking platforms. So Booking.com and Airbnb kind of have monopolies
Hmm.
in their branch, which means they can ask quite high fees for the hotels and B&Bs that list on them. So it's really trying to find accommodation that also benefits the locals. So whether that be couch surfing or things like Fairbnb, I think is a thing that
Oh,
is.
what's that one? What Fair B&B? FARE?
Yeah. So it's basically Airbnb, but they invest part of their profits in local projects, and they have more demands, I think, in terms of sustainability before a place gets listed on there, and they really try to have their profit go into the local community instead of just some CEO's wallet, basically. But these were all things that I didn't realize even when I started out thinking more about the sustainability of transport.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's something that I think about a lot too. Staying in Airbnbs as I've been traveling is also the over tourism, the gentrification of the areas that I'm going, and they're driving up the cost for the local economy.
Yeah, exactly. That's another very big problem. And also quite hard to solve, especially in
Hmm.
places that are also economically dependent on the tourism.
Yeah.
So yeah, there. I don't think there's a straightforward solution, but if people become more aware of this, then hopefully that will be the first step to changing the system.
Yeah, that's something that I think about a lot. It's like, okay, well, if I wanna live somewhere, and initially Airbnb is like the best way for me to do it. And then from there, I will typically negotiate off of Airbnb with the landlord. And in some cases, I've also asked them about their other properties and cut a more local deal, or ask also other locals that I meet, like, how much are you paying? Like, what's standard? Just so I know I'm not like insanely driving up costs in this area. But apart from that, like, what are other ways that you can make sure that like you're staying somewhere that's not necessarily completely negatively impacting the local economy, but then also as I'm staying there, what are the things that I want to look for to make sure that the accommodations are also sustainable?
Yeah, so the big one is that they're locally owned, so
Mm.
that the place you're staying is not part of an international chain, is not owned by a foreign investor, and that can be a little bit hard to find out. But to do with Airbnbs, it often helps if you stay in a room in someone's house instead of renting the entire apartment or house. And yeah, basically search on places websites and see what you can find out. Also, the number of rooms is often an indication. So the more rooms an hotel has, the less likely it is that it's being owned by, say, a family or
Mm.
some genuine locals. So these, I think, are a few ways to try and navigate this, but it is a tricky field.
It definitely is. Yeah, as you're navigating like all the different factors that go into to travel, which is why I'm like, I love that you provide some of these tips on the website that you have in your blog as well as on Instagram. I think that goes a long way in terms of helping people even just start thinking about these things, and in their planning process. You know, if you have, I'm not sure if you do, but like a checklist even would be really helpful of like, okay, as you're planning, like, have you considered for accommodation, like, have you looked into these 5 things? It's like check check check, like that would be That would be amazing. Just so like, you can take that first step of like, okay, I at least thought about this, and I know that, I'm not going to stay in like a big Marriott at the moment, and maybe I'll do the B&B and balance that out if I have to do a flight, and is that something that you can also do, like balance out some of the impacts that you have across all the different things that you do plan?
Yeah, I think in general with sustainability, perfectionism is the biggest pitfall, where if you think, oh, I can't find a place that's both locally owned and vegan and is electricity efficient, I might as well stay at a hotel. Whereas it already helps if one of these three points is checked off.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also, if I could make a checklist, it's actually a good inspiration, thanks. But even just crossing one of the things off this checklist is already a win. And it's going to be very hard to find some places that tick off all the boxes. So yes, you can definitely balance it out to make it more realistic.
Yeah, I think that that's like a super helpful and approachable aspect of it too. Of like, okay, like, yeah, I mean, it's either this or I stay on the streets. So like maybe I'm gonna stay at this place, but I'm gonna more frequently, or I'm going to frequent more local establishments, or maybe change up I know you have tips on souvenirs and the types of things to purchase in each of the places that are more sustainable. So there's a lot of different aspects, it sounds like, of sustainability and travel that you can balance out your trip to be maybe not as net negative as initial.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Definitely try to leave a more positive impact than you kind of do, in between brackets, harm to the place you're
Mm-hmm.
visiting. And yeah, it's also I think a learning process, and you will get a better idea of what's doable for you, and what's realistic to find when you're planning your travels.
Amazing. And okay, so a couple more questions. What is one last tip that you would give women who are considering? I usually ask considering traveling solo for the first time, but a bit hesitant. But let's add on that version of like sustainability on top of it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that it's good to start small, and actually start within your comfort zone. So if you're not a big solo traveler, or you're not a big sustainable traveler, then indeed, like, going on a week-long trip in a foreign country on your own and trying to do everything sustainably is probably not super realistic. And also in terms of solo travel, it isn't for everyone. So it's good to start small, just do maybe a weekend in a nearby city, which is then also quite sustainable because you're going less far and it's exploring your own region. And then see how you like it, what aspects of it you do like, which aspects you don't. And I think that helps making solo as well as sustainable travel a bit more approachable.
I love it. I love that tip. That's amazing. Yeah. Start small. And every guest that I have on, like the majority of them have that same tip of start small, start in your own backyard. You get to learn so much just by doing that. Okay, perfect. And now we've made it all the way back into our last question, which is also about play. How is play part of your life now? And what do you do in your life daily that feels like play?
Yeah, so I really like board games still. And I occasionally also make like expansions for existing board games because it just
Oh,
is such a creative thing to do. And I think, yeah, that kind of stayed from my childhood.
that's amazing.
But yeah, generally playing board games, I think, is a big one. But also actually planning travels is a bit like a puzzle to me, because you
Mhm.
have this amount of time, you have this amount of money, this is where you want to go, that's all the things you want to do, and now fit it into something that is doable and fun, and yeah, within budget, within time limits, etc. So it's not really a game, but it does feel like it a little bit.
No,
And as said
definitely.
before, also the kind of challenge of like, oh, how sustainable can I make this trip? Also feels a bit playful. So Yeah.
I love that. I love that you still do an element of the creating your own games piece as an adult, because that shows me that like you're tapped into that inner child and assessing like, okay, what are the things that light me up and have brought that into your life. So that's always great to see from people. And you're like, oh yay, that child part of you is still alive and ticking. And also I had this like idea, you could take it or leave it, but like a sustainable travel board game would be really cool if you create one.
Yeah, that would definitely be a challenge, but who knows at some point.
Yeah, you can teach people how to plan a trip in like a board game fashion. Something as you're kind of already doing a little bit of both, throw that into the gamify piece.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on today's podcast. I've had such a lovely time chatting with you about sustainability and travel, and also getting to know you a little bit through your travels and your childhood activities too.
Yeah, thank you so much. I actually learned quite a bit from you as well, because the whole mindset about play just isn't something I consciously thought about a lot. So, yeah, that's a really interesting perspective, and thanks for having me.
Yay, thank you. And I love to hear that. Perfect. And I will share all of the things that you are working on in the show notes as well as social media, so that everyone else out there listening can get a better understanding of how to incorporate sustainability in their travels as well. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you, listeners, for hopping on to today's travels. I hope that you have learned something about the aspect of sustainability that you can take onto your trip as well. And I hope her story has resonated with you all. And I will see you all at the next adventure. As we wrap up another beautiful and insightful episode, I want to leave you with an opportunity to deepen your journey of connection. So head over to travelnotsescape.com/friends to explore the Passport to Connection program. This is a unique one-day live virtual workshop and monthly mastermind that's designed to empower you on your journey of connection. And this goes from connecting back into yourself, reigniting your spirit of play, understanding what you value for yourself and in friendships, where to find these people, especially while you're traveling, and then once you actually meet them, how to turn those connections into friendships, handle rejection, handle filtering for like-minded individuals, and then once you're friends, how to actually maintain these connections, especially when time and distance are a factor. So this is a one-day live virtual workshop because I wanted to make sure you got all of this knowledge right away so that you can start connecting with people. So if you're going on a trip or if you're moving soon, I wanted you to have all this information, all of these actionable insights right at your fingertips. And you will immediately be joined by a small group of like-minded individuals that are going on the same journey. So you are also building community right along with getting all the information that you need. So go ahead and head to travelnotsescape.com/friends. I have more information on there. I am creating a very intimate group for this workshop, so make sure to sign up soon so you can secure your spots. And I am so excited to welcome you all into the program. Until next time, keep exploring, connecting, and playing, and safe travels, navigators.